feels an awful lot about Keane, and let's look at his view on Ferguson.
Two words the manager, and he spoke to me about a number of times, was control and power. That was how he worked. And I think we can clearly see that because he's still striving for it now, even though he's not a manager. I don't think that will ever leave him. I think there's massive ego involved in that. You know, you have a power and control over people, and then you try and have it over people even when you're not working with them. I suppose the biggest compliment I can give him for all the games I played under him, I always felt he got it right. He always had a good feel for what the group needed, you know, in the sense of it might be a team talk. If a player stepped out of the line, he generally got it right.
I thought his comments, Eamon, were more measured than the media comment originally suggested. I thought they were much more vicious, I thought, when I read him in the paper. But I thought he was quite moderate and quite measured in what he said this time.
I thought he was measured, but he did say some very hard things about what he called that man, Ferguson. Yeah. And there's clearly a great deal of bitterness. He said there's no relationship there.
Did you get that sense when you were talking to him, when you did the book with him?
No. When I worked with him, Ferguson was the man, and he owed a lot. He owed everything to Ferguson, and he had an entirely different narrative. But that was only to be expected. He was there. He was captain of the team. I didn't expect him to shop Ferguson in that regard.
That was before he left Manchester United.
Oh, it was. Of course it was. I didn't.
When he left Manchester United, his opinion about Ferguson changed completely. And I thought actually last night he went out of his way, or during the documentary, he was out of his way to say as many bad things as he could about Ferguson. I thought it was.
Did you think so?
Yeah, I thought it was wrong.
After the success, was he?
Yeah, after the success they've had together, I thought it was wrong.
Well, I have to say in Keane's defence, Liam, that Ferguson, he recounts how Ferguson thanked him for the 11 and a half years he'd given to the club, and Keane said, well, it was actually 12 and a half years, but what he said was that he was pitched out of the club. He had no club to go to. He was injured. There was a money issue which wasn't to his satisfaction. So I think there is residual bitterness there. I think for me what was fascinating, all of it was the reference there to power and control over a club he is no longer the manager of. Now, Roy Keane knows the score. For Manchester United fans, that is the most troubling remark that Keane made, and I didn't think he was.
Well, I don't know how
it came out of badness.
I don't know how true that is. That Ferguson is striving for control or power. That might be just Roy Keane's opinion. Well, I haven't seen Ferguson interfere.
But he picked his successor.
But we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, do we?
Sorry, I think Roy Keane was referring to the fact that Ferguson would in some way be controlling Moyes.
Well,
I don't think that's the case at all.
That he wouldn't be able to give up control more than anything else. Did you see the documentary last night?
No, I didn't. It's just, I agree with Liam, it's sad really that these two had so much success, and Keane was a vital part of that successful team. But in Keane's defense, in Roy's defense, you've got to say Ferguson put a lot of things in that book, which is it's just a poor effort, because he wouldn't be a Sir now if it wasn't for Roy Keane. He was a vital part, probably the main part for that most successful time they've had. And then to come out and insult your captain, who's been at the football club for 12 and a half years. I don't know what went through his head. It's just beyond belief. I don't see any reason why he could do that. And these players all made him.
That's true.
The manager's only as good as his players are.
I think Didi's right. I think that's a point Keane made last night. He wants to interfere in David Beckham's choice of his wife.
That's right. And he said you can't win with choir boys. He said you have to be tough.
Well, I mean, that's
you have
not
to take
his
on the manager occasionally.
But the other thing, Liam, is that it's obvious that he chose his successor to manage the biggest club in the world.
Yeah, he was given that power by the Glazers, and wouldn't you? Answer me. You're asking me a question. You answer me a question. Who's more qualified to pick a successor, the Glazers or Ferguson?
There's no answer to that. Of course, it's Ferguson.
Well, I would say he knows a bit more about football than.
Yeah, can I change the subject for a second? I thought Keane came across as a very appealing person, very driven. Like some of the stuff he said about hurting and all that kind of stuff was amazing. But what would you take out of that from the Irish point of view now as the assistant manager to O'Neill?
Well, I would hope. I was never a friend of Keane's, and I kept my distance. I did the book. I always found him to be charming, funny, very funny, charismatic in a certain way. Lovely family situation, his children and his wife, very, very nice people, well behaved, a real good man.
He is a good man.
That was always my opinion. But when he went on the pitch, he was different. And he talked last night in the documentary, it's well worth seeing incidentally, about hating. Whereas Patrick Vieira was much more sophisticated.
He was.
And never talked about hating. He talked about hoping and believing and stuff like that. I mean, it was an interesting concept.
I agreed a lot more with what Vieira had to say than
we're running out of time. I want to ask you a question. You played against both Vieira and Keane. Which was the tougher?
Well, the tougher one was Vieira because he's a physically he's got a bigger presence,
man,
I think with Roy Keane always had a huge impact on his team. He wasn't somebody who hurt you. He wasn't somebody who would, try to leave the foot in or hurt you on purpose. Whereas Vieira, he was quick, he was powerful, with his long legs, it was very hard to get the ball of him. Whereas Roy Keane always had a much, much bigger impact on his team. So from a personal point of view, I would play against Keane rather than...
All right, okay, we've got to leave us there. I'd love to ask a lot more questions of the three of us. It's a wonderful documentary, and I urge you all to watch it next week.